Borderlands 3. If you don't know what Borderlands 3 is, it's a game where you find a shotgun, shoot some people, find a rocket launcher, shoot some people, find a pistol that's also a shotgun, shoot some people, find a pistol that is basically a shotgun, shoot some people, and then find a pistol that is also a shotgun that is also a rocket launcher, shoot some people, and then you win the game. If you don't know what environmental engineering is, then it's fine. It's complicated. It's a wide subject. But just know that I'm going to be covering 5 topics: flora, fauna, pollution, waste disposal, and energy generation. So let's get started with Pandora is a desert wasteland, but it does have some pretty up-to-date American infrastructure. But besides broken bridges and crumbling roads, most of the buildings on Pandora are makeshift, which makes me wonder how in the world the power grid works. There are working lights and working vending machines, which implies a constant continuous source of power, but also we can see that the only source of power is wind turbines? Besides that, there are an abundance of what seem to be working high voltage transmission lines, and I don't think there's a good supply of electrical engineers on Pandora to keep those running. Right off the bat for flora, we can see these little tufts of grass, which I think look most like desert needlegrass. The only other plant in the area is this weird cactus with needles on its very top, so I'm just going to call it mildly alarming cactus. In terms of pollution for this first part of Pandora, this mine does have some open and uncontrolled acid mine drainage, but honestly this is the only instance, so it's not terrible. Yeah, Pandora doesn't have a lot going on when we first get here. For flora, we have 2 whole species, which honestly, that's fine. It's a desert on a deserted wasteland. I'm surprised it has any vegetation at all. For flora, I'm actually going to say that that's TBD, because I'm going to do that at the end and have a whole retrospective of everything that's going on, because it's crazy. But we do see some evidence of a reclamation of infrastructure by animals, which is kind of nice. For pollution, it's honestly not terrible. I mean, there's no corporations around, so they're not going to be polluting too much. There's some drainage from a mine, which isn't great. It's probably going into whatever water source Pandora has. I honestly have no idea. For waste, as you can see right here, yeah, just shove it in a bag, throw it on the ground, and that's the extent of it. Maybe light it on fire, but this is a land of psychos. There's not going to be any waste disposal, recycling, anything like that. And for energy, hey, look at that. It's renewable so far. There are some vehicles around, and they seem to run on sort of diesel or gas, but everything else, it's windmills as far as the eye can see. There's some sort of power grid. I have no idea how it works, but I'm loving it. We will be back, but for now, we fly somewhere new. Now right off the bat, I need to talk about my biggest gripe with this game, and that is when you enter this area, and it pops up with, quote, the spillways. These aren't spillways. Spillways are the things that dams have. If anything, this looks most like the LA River. It's like a concreted over stream that's only there for when it rains a lot. If we look at one side of this spillway, we can see a ramp where water would flow down during heavy rain. But if we look at the other side, there's another ramp. It all goes downwards. It's just a pool. And of course, local corporations are just going to be actively dumping into it, which implies that this is what it is meant for. But it doesn't make sense for this area to store water because there's these little outlets that just lead to more flowing water and flooded areas and ventilation. Water can't get up there. That's ventilation. My most generous read is that this is some sort of constructed wetland for some attempt at wastewater treatment. But beyond that engineering nightmare, there are some other things, like some interesting bridges with some very large cavities I've never seen before, and also some vehicle fires that's causing some pretty bad metal leachate. In this area we hear this audio clip.
Daryl was this guy who blew himself up, suspended methanol from a pyrotech's flamethrower.
Methanol? You mean toxic methanol? You mean blue flame / invisible flame methanol? You mean explosive methanol? That's what all of these guys have on their backs? That's just a weird choice, dude. One interesting thing about Promethea is the fact that it's tidally locked to the sun. That means that the sun never moves in the sky and that all of the plants here have to grow with pure sunlight all the time, only being blocked by an asteroid belt in the way, which is a very interesting concept for plant evolution. Although I'm not sure it changed much because this is just an ash tree, except for the fact that ash trees have terminal leaves on all of their branches and this one has a mix. So this is just a mildly incorrect ash tree. Next to it, another tree, which I thought was different but is actually just a dead ash tree. And in the next area we have this. A planter. Full of grass. Moving closer to Atlas proper, we get a lot more indoor spaces, which means a lot more ornamental plants. Here we have some vague orange ornamental with parallel venation, and over in the corner is some weird orange philodendron with spots underneath. Getting into the courtyard, we see this tiny stubby little thing, which kind of looks like a topped ash tree, which is where you cut all the branches off at the top, hoping that it will grow back in a better way. It never does. Don't do it. Just a bit away, we see this hedge, which, hold on. That's better. This one is really weird because hedges aren't usually made with big-leaved plants. So I'm going to say that this is actually bindweed that has taken over another plant and now it's a hedge. I also found this shrub with really weird branches, so this is just miscellaneous dead shrub. And right next to it is this ash tree with little suckers on the bottom, which I thought was just a really cool addition. A little further on, we see some more plants that look like they've been topped, and if you look at them closely, you can actually see they're hollow on the inside. I was a bit confused on these for a while till I looked at it from the side on, and I looked at this little shoot, and I realized, oh, that's probably a bamboo shoot, which means that this is actually the endless struggle against bamboo. Going more inside, we see this leaf, which is the same leaf from the bindweed outside, so I guess this is if bindweed was a tree. Going into the subway, we first see this little guy, which I think is absolutely a Japanese maple. And yes, I did say subway. These plants are underground. I have no idea how they're alive. Inside is an aquarium with this, I guess, foliaceous coral species. And then there's this fish. I have no idea, so I'm just gonna say it's a carp, but it's kind of missing a few fins. And then there's the ash tree.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
And then there's these mushrooms, and while bioluminescent mushrooms do exist, they're not spotted like this, so this is some unknown bioluminescent mushroom. Promethea is absolutely covered in trash. And maybe that's because the robots who do these jobs are currently trying to kill me for some reason, or maybe it's just the fact that there's a literal war going on. Honestly, the trash isn't that big of an issue. The Atlas company specifically uses green spaces in a really interesting way. If you see here, there's a bunch of grass right outside of someone's doorway, and also it's covered on the top. Is this because they have constant sunlight? Is this for water infiltration reasons? I don't know, but I like it. Look at this tree. Why are you up there? Why are you inside? Look at this. Imagine if every time you went out to eat and you wanted to sit outside, it wasn't impenetrable concrete underneath your feet, but grass. These umbrella tables are super nice. They are underneath an awning, so it's not doing much. But I still love the idea. I wish local stores would do this. A little later, they do implement this without the building over top, but they do forget to add stairs, so it's kind of hard to get up there. And now the sewer drains. They're pretty nice, but they are only in this area. And I don't know how well they're working. They are kind of filled with silt. Another city zone is this area, which has no drains whatsoever. I could only find this one manhole cover, implying the existence of a sewer. If we try and find the lowest point in the city, this will eventually end up taking us to the subway system. If we go to the lowest point, we find a lot of dirt and silt, which I'm sure is washing out and potentially creating a sinkhole underneath this infrastructure. One thing I will say is that this city is fairly walkable. Walkable meaning that I can't fit my car down the sidewalk. Here we find our first proper drain. It's up on a lip, so it's not working properly, but at least it's there. It is servicing a very, very large area, and I hope it doesn't get clogged at some point because this entire place will flood with many feet of water. But honestly, I was just really excited to see that this existed. There's a better one outside of the Atlas Bank, and I'm just kind of assuming that these are for rainwater, but if we look up, there's not much of an atmosphere to go off of. There's another further ahead, but it's kind of on a lip, so it's not really doing anything. Again, just a bit away. No, they're not doing much. This one is doing a much better job. It's in a low-lying area beneath these steps, except for the fact that it's inside. This one too, you're telling me we have 6 drains and 3 of them are inside? I don't know if you could tell, but drains aren't supposed to be inside. That's not usually how they work. But onto flora, we had a whole 10 species, which is great. Even though 9 of them were ornamental, I'm just going to look past that, and I'm happy that we have plants. For fauna, it's still TBD, but there weren't really any. This was kind of a very uh, urban landscape. For pollution, instant cancer. Why are they dumping, presumably, their sewer waste into a giant vat right next to their house? It's like if I just filled this with sewage and then, yay, happy, good, yeah, no, you're gonna die. Fix that. There were also a couple car fires. I mean, there's a car fire right over there, but yeah, that's leaching straight into the water. It's not great, but listen, I know they're in a war right now. I just have to say, fix your shit. For waste disposal, they are still in a war, but I actually think they had it pretty down before. They have robots to deal with all that. Pretty good. And for energy, I'm assuming it's just a typical city. We didn't see much, so probably some mix of renewable and non-renewable sources. Probably some coal, maybe some solar, maybe some wind generation. Can't win them all. But moving on from there, we're on to somewhere else. No question where Athenas gets its power. Everywhere you look, there's a wind turbine. Although I'm not really sure how the ones way over there are helping. All this power seems to be routed through the local grid, which serves to power these fans. They might be AC. And whatever this is, kind of looks like sewage treatment. It's also possible that this place is powered by these shock barrels, which seem pretty unstable. I wouldn't stand next to one. One interesting thing is that they don't seem to be taking advantage of water power generation at all, even though they seem to have structured some of their infrastructure around it. I think this could be a really big improvement. They seem to have a lot of springs around, they're up very high on some mountains. It's a big opportunity. When it comes to trash, Athenas has absolutely dropped the ball. There's trash on roofs, there's trash on the street, there's trash next to a completely empty dumpster. A dumpster which, might I add, has holes on the side like it's meant to be picked up by a garbage truck. And a garbage truck could not fit on these streets. There's not even cars here. Even outside this residential business. Trash. Maybe if the residents weren't so busy playing edgelord, they could do some community service and pick up some trash around here. We do see the familiar leaves of a Japanese maple, which are falling off of this tree on this mountainside. We also learned its favorite type of fertilizer, along with the fact that it's apparently heavily resilient and can grow straight into rock. We see an old familiar dead shrub, along with a new dead shrub, which just adds to our list of dead shrubs. There's this new tree with fairly typical bark, and some pine needles, which I think is an eastern white pine. We then see the personal bane of my existence, the invasive English ivy, as well as some poor quality moss. In the water we see some water lilies. Just next to it we see one of the only true invasive duckweeds, redroot floater duckweed. And then we have some non-bioluminescent mushrooms. Now onto the grasses, which are actually common between most planets, I just haven't talked about it. A dandelion, horseweed, a ribwort plantain, common bluebell, duckweed, but it's on land, ribwort again, and grass. Over here we have some tall fescue and some Japanese bloodgrass. I have no idea what this plant could be, but right next to it we have an evening primrose with a phosphorus deficiency, which can be seen without the deficiency later on. And next to that is this weird lanky plant. Plants don't usually grow like that. But right behind this we have this really cute courtyard, which has this really interesting... God damn it, Trant. Yeah, let me just deal with this guy really quickly. God damn it, Trant. Yeah, this courtyard has some really interesting issues with standing water. I thought cobblestone had some pretty good water permeability. I don't really know why water is building up in this place. It could be because of these cute standing beds, but they can stay. Athenas is pretty nice. For flora, 11 species. There's a slight, very slight invasive takeover with the English ivy, and maybe the Japanese maple. I'm not certain. But I think it can be dealt with. I think it's not a really big issue here. For fauna, I'm still going to go over that later, but there's a bit of a pest problem. For pollution, this place is very clean. There are some minor trash issues with trash over the place, but overall, doing pretty well. Speaking of trash, come on guys, just pick it up. You're right there, you're not doing anything else. There was a completely empty dumpster next to a mountain of trash. What is this? What is their disposal system? I can't tell. For energy though, very renewable. It's very nice. Although, I'm just wondering, why don't they use more water power? Do they have an excess of power somewhere? They have all of these wind turbines. They're doing great work, but they live in the mountains. There's springs, there's streams, there's waterfalls. Just take advantage of it, please. I believe in you. If you're wondering why we're back in Promethea, that's because we have an issue.
This way. No, 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 no!
This is a death blazer built into an asteroid. There's no flora, there's no fauna, but I still do have some issues with it. Like, look at these dump trucks. Why don't they have a back? Why aren't they enclosed? We're in low gravity. Things could fall out so easily. Look at these pipes. They make no sense. 092, 071, M/5YKS, coolant, main, ppm 04 to 02, that could be parts per million, I guess. Heatant? That's actually my favorite joke in the game. But then I realized that both of these red lines are the same thing, meaning that the heatant is the ppm. RCOM 06, 122, 487. I'm just going to assume that those are shift codes and that these pipelines supply fuel and oxygen to these massive thrusters. I also just really appreciate the accuracy of this one. And I absolutely refuse to theorize where the energy for this laser comes from.
Sayonara, Sonora!
For flora, we're on an asteroid. For fauna, we're on an asteroid. For pollution, there isn't an atmosphere to pollute, really, so. And for trash, it's probably just incineration. They have a big laser. And energy generation, that's the big question here. How does that work? Sure, man. Next up, not a planet, but not an asteroid. Eden 6 is actually a moon, a very swampy moon at that, and has some incredibly fast-growing trees. It appears to be mostly covered in water, and occasionally a black void will take you and consume you. Stop. What? What? Where'd it go? Eden 6 is pretty much solely inhabited by the Jacobs Corporation, a weapons manufacturer, and at first I was pretty much just wondering how this place had any electricity at all. They have lights, satellites, power lines, and I refuse to believe that these are all powered by a couple dinky wind turbines. I did find this generator looking thing, but I still had no idea what was powering it. That was until I found it. The fossil fuel industry. They're drilling and probably fracking for some funky looking oil, then storing it, processing it, then drilling all over again. It's an unsustainable cycle. It releases methane into the atmosphere, and it should not be happening this close to residential areas. But I guess the Jacobs Corporation only cares about profits. I mean, where the workers live, they have a postal service and a saloon. This isn't just a town, this is a company town. Onto floor, we see lily pads and, hold on, and that one ornamental plant in its natural habitat. In this courtyard, the shrubs are back, and that one weird shrub is back. And oh look, English ivy. For the new stuff, this thing definitely doesn't exist, so I'm going to call it fungi stick. These things with the feathers look really similar to the knees of a bald cypress, and that's actually just its roots. It's the only tree that does that. Hanging from the bald cypress actually looks like Spanish moss, which only grow on oaks and bald cypress. These little bunches kind of look like the lily pad, but instead I'm going to say that it's garlic mustard, which is invasive and also tastes really bad. These things aren't real, but they kind of look like a weird cattail. And for this, yeah, I've never seen anything like that before. This looks like a Christmas fern, which still has a couple fiddleheads on top. This is a stretch, but Verschaffeltia splendida has some similar spines and also some very vaguely similar leaves. There's also just a vegetable garden with some pumpkin and squash in it. Quite a few things look like this little guy, but I'm going to call it Sidote's grandma, because I think that name is funny. This spiky abomination is not real. Neither are these weird, goopy flowers. Sitting in this nest are some leaves we've never seen before. And sitting right outside the vault for this world is the only instance I can find of this weird dead shrub. Onto the trees, this one kind of looks like a croton. This flowering or fruiting one is pretty obviously a monstera. The last and by far largest tree, which you can see all the life stages for around, I think is a fenestrated monstera, and this thing absolutely dominates the landscape. Now in this picture, we can see what looks like snow tussock, and in this other picture, we can see what looks like a little sliver of a brittle bush. Finally done with the flora, we can move on to the main export of Eden 6, which is guns. And these guns have wooden stocks, leading to a large need for lumber, and quite a few areas that are clear-cut. And these appear to be clear-cut using a chainsaw, which doesn't have a chain, and it's not a saw, so I guess it's a wire cutter. It's just hot metal. By counting the rings on this tree, we can... Hold on. By counting the rings, we can see that it's around 19 years old, which is really good for the lumber industry. Usually it's minimum 25 years, although it does seem to be breaking the fabric of reality here, so that's not great. Finishing it up on Eden 6, we can find a... What the f... Okay, yeah, this big weird tree monster thing is mostly made of bark, but he does have some familiar leaves up top. Oop, just a punch for good luck. He does appear to have the ability to shoot lasers, which is interesting, not really sure how that's possible, and also can spew bile or goo everywhere, not sure where he's keeping that. But more importantly, I think it's purple lettuce, or it could be Osaka purple mustard, that's on top of his head. Although it doesn't really matter because it does kind of blow up after a bit. And after you kill him, you can see some of those bioluminescent mushrooms again. Oh, hey. Probably shouldn't have electronics in the water. Eden 6. Flora. A whole 23 species. Absolutely incredible. And it's very natural. There's not a lot of invasive species. For fauna, still TBD, but here's a hint. Dinosaurs. Pollution. I would really like to see some environmental protections around the drilling sites. I figure there's probably not a lot. It's surrounded by water. There's no way for... There's probably tons of methane leaching into the water, especially in these residential areas. Not good. For waste management, pretty clean. There's not a lot of trash around. It's pretty nice. For energy generation, sucks that it's so much oil drilling. But honestly, this kind of sucks to say, but it's fine. There's probably plenty of other ways they can get energy, but if it's just the Jacobs Corporation operating a few drills, this is probably a very oil-heavy area given the vegetation. If you're wondering where all of those invasive species came from, I think we might have an idea. Back on Sanctuary. This freaky little friend, I believe, is one of many culprits to the interworld invasive mess that we've seen so far. Transporting numerous unidentified potted plants, as well as some English ivy, seeds from these can spread anywhere this ship goes. Oh hey, a coneflower. Sanctuary doesn't really have any pest or trash problems. You can kind of just shoot everything out of an airlock. And they're very low velocity, so they'll probably just burn up upon entering an atmosphere at some point in time. Yeah, Sanctuary doesn't have much going on, but after this, we actually do go back to Pandora, but I'm just going to sum it up here. Back on Pandora, we learned that oil is spilling everywhere, the power grid is still wacky as hell, there's this generator-looking thing that looks like it runs on water right underneath of a water tower. I don't know what it does. There's burning trash, there's trash in piles which are specifically over a very empty and clean chasm. We blow up this absolutely massive tank of diesel fuel, which generates 2,305 tons of CO2, yay. And then we kill Penn and Teller. Then we're back on Sanctuary, which can take us to...
Holy crap.
Nekrotafeyo.
Nekrotafeyo makes no sense. There's this giant rotating cube. If you need power, just bring your own generator. The flora is suitably alien. There's this thing, this Venus flytrap thing, this bioluminescent thing, and whatever this is. One plant that may have a parallel is here, which I think kind of looks like the American cancer root, which tastes like hash browns. Ask me how I know. The way that it roots and spreads out actually reminds me of Daughter, which is interesting because both of those plants are actually parasitic. These massive unfurling plants dot the landscape. This hanging one is weird. This one is alive, I think. This one might not even be a plant. This one flies. There's massive twisted forests of plants, cave plants, these barnacle things. Yeah, you know, Nekrotafeyo, it's really isolated, so it has a lot of unique biology. It doesn't really have any connections to the other planets, and... What? That's an ash tree! Why is there an ash tree on Nekrotafeyo? So, Nekrotafeyo. Ooh, wow. Don't want to fall off here. There's a whole lot of unique biology. And then just a single ash tree. Listen, I know it's probably an oversight, but it's not an oversight. This is an invasive species that originated on Nekrotafeyo. I believe this with my whole heart. The developers meant this. For fauna. Still, TBD, but just imagine weird aliens with knives for hands. For pollution and waste management, not applicable. Literally one guy lives here. For energy generation, I don't know how the cube is floating. And I don't care. But from here, we can finally go back to Pandora, or as it's actually called, the Great Vault.
God power, bitches!
Finally returning to Pandora, this area looks like a huge abandoned mining operation. It actually does look like Pandora has... Hold on. Pandora does actually have some Cytote's grandma. I spotted this large tree, which I really didn't expect from Pandora's ecology. This little seeding grass kind of looks like Johnson grass. And next to it we can have what I can only assume is a yucca, which actually if you take their flowers and then pan fry them in some oil, they soak up all the oil and they taste really bad. And finally, for a full summation of Pandora, we have at least 6 species. They're really weird, but they're there. For fauna, that's still to be determined. Pollution, it's pretty bad now. There's oil everywhere, and there were a lot more mines that were abandoned than I thought. That's surely causing a lot of issues with local wildlife. For waste management, it's bad. There's trash fires everywhere. There's piles of trash. That is for sure leaching straight into the soil, straight into the water. I would not drink whatever water they have on Pandora. For the power generation, still remarkably wind-powered. You know, there's still vehicles all around, so they have some source of diesel or gasoline, but the grid is remarkable. I don't know how they manage it, but bravo. That's full props. But now I think it's time to finally talk about fauna. What? Huh? Is that a chameleon? What? This thing turns into that, and then turns into that. And these guys come from eggs. No, wait, they start as gnats. Or they come from this? Or from her? That one just has a mustache. Horns from its eyes. From this thing comes these guys. That's a dinosaur. That's just a dinosaur with a minnow's tail. No idea. Yeah, no. Nekrotafeyo's weird. Why does its face look like that? That's just a monkey with slit pupils. And hardened knuckles? That one's got a gun. That one's got a bigger gun. Big monsters, small monsters. I'd rather just take the easy way out. Finally, done. Here, I have my field notes. I'm going to give recommendations to what I believe each planet should be doing next. Starting off with Promethea, I'm saying that after the war, they should use this as an opportunity to rebuild, like Chicago after the fires or Japan after World War II. I'm going to say that they need to rebuild with better public transportation, some renewed infrastructure, and a suitable water treatment plant. For the asteroid, it is a weapon of war, I do understand, but there's no reason to demolish it. We reuse things all the time. It could be anything. It could be a planetary defense asteroid. I'm just saying that demolishing something is always going to be at the bottom of the tier list. It is the last option that you want to go to when disposing of something. For Athens, I'm just going to say keep doing what you're doing. Keep a small, close, and dense community that's living sustainably. I would say invest much more into water power. I don't know why you aren't already. You have plenty of it available, and I think it would just be more constant and much more available. For Eden 6, you need a lot more protections against fracking, and just find a different source of power. You don't need this non-renewable source of power when there's easily available renewable sources of power that are going to be enough energy-wise to get you through your production processes. And also, this isn't just an environmentally friendly thing, it's also a selling point in business. I've been taught this plenty. It's in your interest to be environmentally friendly. Imagine if on every Jacob's gun you get a little label that says made with 100% renewable power, carbon negative. I think that'd be great. For Nekrotafeyo, I think that it should be immediately instated as a archaeological dig site. No visitors, no nothing, just a preserved site to protect the bygone culture that was there at one point in time. Protect the environment, the flora, the fauna, everything. And as for Pandora, that's the video. If you somehow managed to find this and you watched all the way to here, thank you so much. Don't know if you haven't noticed, but this is the first and maybe only ever video that I'll make. It took a lot longer than I was ever expecting. So, you know, like and subscribe, because you'll probably be one of the only ones. Thanks. See ya. I just have to figure out how the fuck to get out of here.